Okay, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming, and we are here to announce that this morning an indictment was filed here in Geauga County in the Daniel Ott murder case, and that indictment was returned by the grand jury last night, and it charges Joseph Rosebrook, Chad South, and Carl Jeffrey Rosebrook, aka Jeff Rosebrook, of several crimes. Overall, it is a 5-count indictment, the most serious charges being conspiracy to commit aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated murder, burglary, and kidnapping counts against all 3 defendants. And this is for the murder of Daniel Ott that occurred on May 26th of 2006. I want to start off by first thanking the Geauga County Sheriff's Office. You're going to hear from Sheriff Dan McClellan. He will detail the investigation, but I want to start off by thanking the Sheriff's Office. Their detectives have worked tirelessly on this case since 2006, and at no point in time was this ever a closed case. They worked on it the entire time. They pursued leads and suspects both all over Ohio and all over the United States, including making numerous trips out of state. And you'll hear more from Sheriff McClellan, but given the nature and circumstances of the case, the investigation was very difficult because really at the heart of this is witness intimidation and the attempted murder of a witness, which ultimately resulted in the wrong Dan Ott being killed. I also want to thank Mike DeWine's office, the Attorney General. They have assisted on this investigation from day one, and Paul Scarcella here from the Attorney General's office. He's a Senior Assistant Attorney General. They are co-counseling with us on this case, and they've been involved in the investigation. They've been involved in the many logistical issues we faced through the investigation, given that most of the events surrounding this crime occurred in southern Ohio. And that has been challenging both for the Sheriff's Office and my office, and having the resources and the expertise from the Attorney General's office has been significant help for us. The other thing I wanted to mention, we are going to take questions after this, but and you know, historically, and I think those of you that have dealt with us know that we really make an effort to disclose as much information to you as possible without compromising our cases and our investigations, and we try to be very upfront with that information. However, in this instance, there are going to be certain questions that I cannot answer, and probably several questions that the sheriff can't answer. And the reason for that, number one, this is an ongoing investigation. There is a potential for additional indictments in this case, and there is the potential that additional information will be presented to the Geauga County Grand Jury. And more importantly, one of the reasons that we're not going to be able to answer all of your questions, this Joe Rosebrook has a history of witness intimidation. There are significant concerns. You know, this defendant was imprisoned for conspiring to murder a witness. He is the suspect in the disappearance of another witness down in Logan County. And obviously in this case, the allegations here are that he hired a hitman to kill Daniel Ott. So given that history and some of the challenges we faced with the investigation, there are some questions that we won't be able to answer, but we'll do our best to provide you with all the information we feel that doesn't compromise our investigation and also keeps our witnesses safe. At this point, now that the indictment has been filed, all 3 suspects are currently in the Geauga County Jail. The next step will be an arraignment before Judge David Fury in the Court of Common Pleas. Given that the indictment was just filed, I do not have a date yet for the arraignments. However, I expect those arraignments to occur next week for all 3 defendants. And at that time, bond has been set for the defendants in municipal court, but at that time, Judge Fury would entertain other bond questions, and that will be an opportunity for the defendants to be formally presented with the charges in the indictment. At this time, I'm going to turn this over to Sheriff McClellan. He's going to detail the investigation, which, as I've said, was lengthy, and then we'll hear from Chief Deputy Hildebrand, and then we will take some of your questions. Thank you.
Again, Sheriff, could you please say and spell your name?
Sure. It's Dan McClelland, M-C-C-L-E-L-L-A-N-D, Geauga County Sheriff. Most of you recall, May 26, 2006, Dan Ott, Mary Ann Ricker were asleep in their home in Burton Township. They were awoken that morning by their dog barking, and they came face to face with an armed intruder inside the residence. Eventually, a struggle would occur, and the intruder, armed with a shotgun, shot the victim, Dan Ott, point-blank range, killing him. The investigation began at that time. As you do with most homicide investigations, you start looking at activities, relationships, etc. of the victim, looking for clues. Where could this have come from? And all these efforts kept coming up blank. Again, repeated interviews, trying to find out things, trying to learn something. What could this have been? Came up blank. About 6 months into the investigation, came to learn of the Rosebrook enterprise, and a Dan Ott was involved in those cases. Totally different, older Dan Ott from our resident in Burton Township. Detectives began pursuing that information. They conducted interviews, multiple states, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, list goes on. Trying to work this. At that time, Joe Rosebrook was an inmate at the London Correctional Facility in Ohio. Detectives came to learn that he had a smuggled track phone in the facility with him, and that he had maintained his contacts on the outside in his criminal network. They specialized in a chop shop operation, stealing cars, parting them out, selling cars. But they also engaged significantly in witness intimidation. One of the questions I anticipated today was, how can an investigation like this take 9 years? Detectives repeatedly ran into the phrase, "I know what you want, they will kill me." And people flat refused to talk. Numerous search warrants, wiretap warrants were obtained, and the matrix, the network of this criminal operation became clearer and began to come into focus. What occurred was Joe Rosebrook, while still in his prison cell, put out a hit, if you would, on a gentleman named Dan Ott. He provided information to the hitman, Chad South. So they had spent time in Logan jail together and in the prison system. Joe Rosebrook, brother, Carl Jeff Rosebrook, was the money man in the operation. He was the one to have paid for the hit. Chad South went to the wrong house. Came to Burton, Ohio, and subsequently murdered Dan Ott from Burton, Ohio. The investigation was never closed, was never a cold case. And frankly, looking back over the last 9 years, I doubt that a week would go by without some action by the detectives in following up the investigation and in working the case. You can imagine the difficulty investigating a homicide when frankly they got the wrong guy. Very challenging. Chad South is currently in the Geauga County Safety Center. Joseph Rosebrook, picked up near Dayton. He is currently in the Geauga County Safety Center. I'm sorry, he was picked up in Florida, my mistake. And brother Carl Jeffrey Rosebrook was picked up near Dayton, Ohio, and is currently being held in the Safety Center. This time I'll introduce my Chief Deputy, Scott Hildebrand. We've maintained contact with the victim's family, and he'd like to expound on that. Scott?
Again, spell your name, please.
Scott, with 2 T's, Hildenbrand. As the sheriff stated, we've been in contact with the family throughout this last 9 years, and they do not live in the area, so they have prepared a statement that they'd like us to read. On May 26, 2006, Dan Ott was shot and killed in his home as a result of mistaken identity. He was a son, a brother, a caring and compassionate friend who was taken too soon from his family and friends. It has been a long 9 years of waiting and hoping for some resolution to this horrific crime, and our patience has paid off. We want to thank the Geauga County Sheriff's Department and their detectives for 9 years of dedicated work to solve this crime and keeping us informed with their progress along the way. We are hopeful that justice will finally be served. The family of Dan Ott.
This time we'll be happy to take your questions. Just let us know who you're directing the question to.
Can you say how much a life is worth, how much they paid for it?
The exact terms of the contract, I'm not going to get into at this point, but since they got the wrong guy, payment was never orchestrated in full. Next question.
Sheriff, is there any evidence that obviously at some point they realized they had the wrong Dan Ott, that they went back after the right Dan Ott?
In other jurisdictions, not Geauga County, we believe there were 2 additional attempts on the right Dan Ott's life during the last 9 years. And
any, obviously, Dan Ott, as I understand, he was a renter in the Clarendon Troy home,
yes.
The Dan Ott in Burton
Yes.
Township. Is there any indication of how South came to learn that Dan Ott was in that home?
We do, but I'm not able to elaborate at this time as to how that may have been. He was typically provided with information and may have lost the right information and looked it up on his own. But I'm not going to get into that more.
And how are the 3 being housed at the jail?
I assume your question is separated. They're maximum security type inmates because of the nature of the crime, etc. So they're being housed in our maximum security areas.
Sorry, Sheriff. You guys have been, I think tenacious is the word for this case. Everybody. What message do you have for those people in the community that still have information about this? And you're going to ask people to step forward. You got you guys in custody. How's it going to work?
Yeah, clearly the investigation is continuing, as the prosecutors has said. We do anticipate additional charges to be forthcoming as well. We understand it takes courage to come forth in this type of a setting and do the right thing. We would ask people to come forth and do that. We have been diligent in, as we have with the media. I mean, you saw this from day one. This is not how we typically handle press issues. We have been very cautious to protect those who have worked with us, etc., and we're going to continue to do that. So anyone who might have additional information, please come forward.
Yeah, is there any, suspicion if Chad South, since she's the one accused of being the actual gunman, has he been doing this sort of thing before? Is he thought of being a hitman in any other cases?
I'd have to talk about other
No,
jurisdictions.
No, we don't believe. We believe it's a unique situation. Again, there were additional attempts on the other Dan Ott, the living Dan Ott's life, but we believe this was a unique situation with Chad South. He just happened to be in the local jail for some time with Joe Rosebrook, and then obviously they were housed together in prison, and we believe it was that contact and his actions just specifically involved this case. That's what we believe at this time.
And is those other attempts, is there any suggestion that Chad South tried to finish the right job?
No, we don't have any evidence that he was involved in those. But again, we do believe that these other incidents were attempts on the other Dan Ott's life.
Were there any arrests made in those other attempts?
No,
Okay.
no, there have not.
I just want to add one thing. This picture that you were provided was provided to us from the family, and they asked that you use that picture.
Any other questions?
And maybe just if you could just elaborate, what role will the Attorney General's office, how will they be assisting your office?
They're going to be co-counsels with us on this case, so we'll be working together with them as we have been up until this point, working together with them to ultimately see that justice is done in the case. Again, the Attorney General's office, not only have they assisted in the prosecution of the case, but it's also they've provided a significant amount of assistance in the investigation. Again, most of the activity here occurred outside of Geauga County, and securing search warrants and securing witnesses and transporting people and all these logistical efforts, and again with the warrants especially, having Senior Assistant Attorney General Paul Scarcella help us every step of the way with that. That's difficult for us logistically to do those things in Southern Ohio. I wasn't even exactly sure where Logan County was before this case came around. So, dealing with those challenges and having somebody who's not only familiar with Central Ohio, but can, work through those warrant issues and the other issues that we've had during the investigative stage has really been a big help.
And the obviously Joe Rosebrook was, the extradition's been completed. Any issues involved with that process? Was he cooperative on the return to Geauga County?
Yes, he did. He waived extradition, so there did not have to be any formal proceedings down in Florida. So he did cooperate with that process, and the sheriff's office did a great job sending their deputies down there and getting them up here, not only in a timely manner but safely. He was in municipal court this morning. That was his initial court appearance, was in municipal court this morning, and that was on the complaint. That had nothing to do with the indictment. But I went over to municipal court this morning because two of the cases were set for preliminary hearing, and Joe Rosebrook was set for the initial hearing, and I delivered the indictments to the municipal court this morning, about 20 minutes after they were filed.
What was bond set on this for Rosebrook this morning?
I'm not sure that his bond was set this morning. I haven't gotten an entry yet from the municipal court. Because I served them with the indictment, I think they may be waiting for him to be arraigned in common police court, but I could find that out for you, Joe.
Any, when you get the arraignment date, you send it over to us?
Absolutely. Again, we're expecting it next week, probably the earlier part of the week.
Do you guys know if when Joseph Rosebrook, had he always lived in Florida, or did he just go there after he got out of prison and then?
Yes, he was incarcerated for 10 years in Ohio for the case out of Logan County, and then when he left prison, then he went down to Florida. And that's where he's been living for approximately a year.
About a year.